If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris. I'm the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friend Jeff, MD, former 26-year CIA operative, affectionately known in our circles as 007, author extraordinaire. Behind him are usually a couple of the books that he's written. He's written more than just those two. You can check them out on Amazon. They're 100% fiction. Nothing in the books ever happened. That's the story, and we're sticking to it, right, Jeff? Wink, wink, nod, nod. So anyway, Khalid's under the weather tonight, and Randy had a procedure at the hospital today. He's feeling quite a bit better than he has the past couple of days, but he'll be back on Monday. So tonight it's just Jeff and I, and we're going to be discussing what America will look like 10 years post 9/11 2.0 and what the new normal will look like at that point in time, with most likely the Patriot Act 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0, and permanent restrictions, normalized surveillance, ongoing terrorist attacks, and ongoing insecurity. However, before we do that, we're going to cover the conflicted question of the night. So if you're not familiar with this, conflictedthegame.com, 14 card decks that have questions set in post-apocalyptic scenarios, typically with a question that revolves around some element of morality, hence the name Conflicted. So in a modern day Jericho and children, you prayed and fasted, but you were still on the fence and it's time to go. Would you join in or not? Why? That's one of the questions, Jeff, that I think when somebody answers it, you get a pretty good take on what their morality is like, because that sounds like it's a no-brainer to me. But
yeah, exactly.
I guess we'll see what everybody else has. So we want to see your answers in the live chat or the comment section down below. Jeff and I will give you our answers at the end of the broadcast, but we're going to jump right in with the daily situation report, the Command 11 situation report. So first one we have up here is a fairly long post from Sarah Adams. I'm going to read the whole thing though, because it's very germane to the conversation that we've been having with regards to the long war 9/11 2.0. So flashing red. The factors for the next 9/11 are already in motion and they're not hard to see. The fall of Kabul handed Al-Qaeda its sanctuary back while the U.S. lost 98% of its intel collection. Terrorists were evacuated out of Kabul among real refugees. Thousands of terrorists have been allowed across the U.S. border unvetted, most with fake identity documents, making watch listing completely ineffective. DHS and ICE immigration sweeps aren't prioritizing deporting high-risk terrorist nationalities. Washington continues funding the Taliban, the very group that harbors bin Laden's son and Saif al-Adel. Abu Muhammad al-Julani and Abul Aziz Haqqani, have been quietly removed from the U.S. bounty list. So Julani, of course, the head of Syria, Haqqani, the head of the Haqqani terror network in Afghanistan, who's also reportedly challenging the Taliban for control of the country. Julani himself was allowed to take a victory lap on U.S. soil. Terrorists praised it, similar to the fall of Kabul, the fall of Syria, and the success of October 7th. There's been no increase in the $1 million bounty for Hamza bin Laden, while the intelligence community still covers up CIA's incorrect assessment that he's deceased. The new CIA director has not course-corrected the agency's Stockholm syndrome with the Taliban, particularly the Haqqanis. Negotiations with terrorists continue in both Gaza and Afghanistan. A seat at the table gives them continued legitimacy. The U.S. is helping bankroll fake ISIS counterterrorism operations, inclusion with the Taliban and Julani in Afghanistan and Syria. U.S. taxpayer funds from this program get diverted to a handful of designated terrorist groups. The FBI still can't wrap up Shamsuddin Jabbar's Louisiana cell or admit that it links directly back to ISIS military commission and the Syrian Defense Ministry of Defense. Aviation security has been weakened due to weak leadership in the TSA and FAMS. No real push to detect Al-Qaeda's invisible bomb, and even as downgraded screening against shoe bombs. Statewide fusion centers are not sharing a NCTC Al-Qaeda Homeland Threat Alert written for law enforcement with local law enforcement and first responders. So fusion centers, we've mentioned this before, but if you didn't catch it, these came post 9/11 1.0. These are in every single state, and they're the liaison, the bridge between the feds and the state, county, and city PDs to dispense intelligence with regards to the terrorist threat. And NCTC, of course, National Counterterrorism Center. Ignoring the fact that both Qatar and Turkey are actively working against our core objective, keeping our homeland safe and our republic strong, is reckless. Failing to recognize the extent of cooperation between the Iranian government and Al-Qaeda after Iran sheltered the group's leadership and their families for 2 decades. If we ask what sets the stage for another catastrophic attack on our homeland, this is it. We've seen this movie before, but the sequel will be far worse, and the public will blame the government for failing to prepare our communities when every warning sign has been flashing red. So, wow, that's a big synopsis on the part of Sarah. And of course, Sarah's part of our Dead Drop Intel group. If you haven't checked it out yet, deaddropintel.org will take you to that Substack. Jeff, as a former intelligence guy working in the Middle East, this seems like a perfect storm of sorts to me. I mean, everything that could go wrong seems to be going wrong for us and right for them.
Yeah, and sadly, it reminds me of before, 9/11, when we just weren't paying attention, even though we knew Al-Qaeda was a threat. They'd already attacked New York once before, I think in 96, tried to bring down the World Trade Center. They'd blown up our embassies in Tanzania and in Kenya, but we didn't take them seriously. When they say they're going to try and kill you, listen. And, I really worry that what's happened on the border over the last 4 years, with it being wide open, they couldn't have done better if they were running our government.
So I know you don't have a hard answer to this, but do me a favor and speculate. Why would so many levels of our government be ignoring this? It's not like it hasn't been brought to every level of government.
I think it's one of those, I want a problem I can easily solve. And if there's a problem that's hard to solve, I'll let somebody else solve it. But everybody has the same attitude, and should say not everybody, but there aren't enough people willing to do the hard job to get it done.
So as I've mentioned before, I'm like this close to being black-pilled these days. And when I was doing the research for this episode, way back when Khalid and I put the whole 144 episodes together, this is episode number 36, by the way. I actually went and checked today to see what the true number is. I thought to myself, we've heard rumors of draft versions of Patriot Act 2.0 for years. I mean, they've been saying that for quite some time. So when I went and did the research and I started seeing what I could find on Patriot Act 2.0, I asked a whole bunch of AIs. We've got 12 subscriptions to 12 different AIs now. And a couple of them that I threw it at, Jeff, you wouldn't be surprised. There's a couple big AIs out there who get the majority of their information from Reddit and Wikipedia. So clearly that's solid intelligence, right? That's good information there.
Yeah.
And they had these, they responded along the lines of Patriot Act 2.0 is a right-wing conspiracy theory. It'll never happen. There's no such thing. These are not the droids you're looking for, sort of thing. But I was surprised at some of the stuff that came up, and I'm going to cover it a little bit when we pivot into chapter 1 or segment 1 tonight. And some of it is pretty crazy stuff. But the crazy thing, Jeff, is that a lot of the stuff that I found while researching this is already happening in Europe, especially in Great Britain. It ties into the digital ID. It ties into arresting people because they said something that shocked hurt somebody's feelings. I don't think I have this particular X post in the brief tonight, but did you hear about, I want to say it was in North Texas, a couple of Muslims who were not born here defaced somebody's property. And I'm trying to remember the exact particulars, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is they got charged, and their attorneys have now come up with this defense that this Christian message that they saw, it triggered them, made them very angry. So when they vandalized it, they were just expressing their First Amendment rights, and there should be no charges. Charges should be dropped.
You could extend that to say, I don't like what you said, so I'm going to exercise my First Amendment rights by killing you. That where I don't have to hear it again. That's, lawyers are lawyers, and lawyers will do what lawyers do, and which is they'll grasp at any straw they can. But what's sad is we've got prosecutors and judges now who will actually entertain that nonsense. And you're seeing it in Britain, where a guy said F Hamas and got arrested. And he's like, and they're like, oh, you're inciting racial violence. And he's like, Hamas is an internationally recognized terrorist group, including recognized by the UK. And, not a religious group, not an ethnicity. It's a terrorist group. And if you can't say F a terrorist group, what can you do? What can you say?
So I didn't catch the whole story, but it sounds like there were some Muslims outside of Keir Starmer's home, the head of Great Britain, protesting against him. I mean, he's in bed with the devil on this stuff, and they'll just as soon, slit his throat as say, kiss my ass.
Oh,
yeah. But it's, again, how many times have we mentioned over the years that what's happening in other Western countries is a great harbinger of things to come here in America. And we need to pay attention to that stuff, because here's another example. Did you catch that Nick Sordor was arrested for disorderly conduct in Seattle last night?
Because he hit their fists with his face.
Yeah, Portland, I should say.
Portland, right, yeah.
So he's a pretty strong proponent of Donald Trump. And he was trying to record what was going on. And the Seattle police, or I can't stop saying Seattle, the Portland police ended up arresting him, threw him in jail overnight for, disorderly conduct. And boy, have they ever opened up a hornet's nest, because now Trump is going to go after Portland. There's been all kinds of announcements this afternoon that they better hold on to their britches. And the first thing he said was, we're going to stop all funding for everything in Portland right now. We're not going to fund this anarchist bullshit. But it just makes me shake my head. But the reason I mention it is because it seems like it's too many years now, but it's got to be at least 5 years that in Great Britain, the cops show up at somebody's door and say, we want to talk to you, with regards to this thing you put on Facebook or X, and we're going to arrest you. And the British people are like, what do you mean you're going to arrest me? Well, you caused somebody anxiety. Okay.
Yeah. Well, where does it say you have a God-given right not to be offended? I'm offended every day. No one's getting arrested for that. And with Nick Sordor, what cracks me up is like 2 nights before, this woman reporter got beaten. I mean, black eye, the whole 9 yards. Mm-hmm. No arrests were made. Portland police were there. They just didn't do anything. But they did have time to give Nick Sordor a parking ticket for overextending his parking meter by 9 minutes.
Right.
So their priorities are fairly clear.
And the thing is, after that Antifa piece of crap hit her with a pipe in the face, there were people following this guy and hollering at the cops. This is the person who just hit her in the face with the pipe. And they did absolutely nothing. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I can't believe it's happening in America, but we've seen it happen overseas. And again, that's a good indicator that it's going to come here.
And you talk of Patriot Act 2.0. And, I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I'm really not. But there are a lot of people who want that because it allows them to solidify power. But if they tried to do it right now, people would rise up and basically say, screw you, and vote them out of office. So they almost need a terrorist attack to justify it. But they want to go with 24/7 surveillance everywhere. They want to go with facial recognition. What they really want to go for too is this whole digital ID, digital currency, because if there's a digital currency and only a digital currency, the government will know everything you spend your money on.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything. Every penny you spend, they'll be able to track.
So that's really interesting that you said that. It wasn't in the brief, but one of the questions I was going to ask you, I was going to say, look, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here for a minute and ask you if you thought there was any potential that the powers that be want this to happen so they can enact Patriot Act 2.0 and absolute power corrupts absolutely sort of thing.
I think so too. I really do. And I think they look at dead Americans as collateral damage for their agenda. Right. And we've seen it with, the wide open borders. They wanted voters in, or potential future voters in, and they wanted to let people in who would alter the census results. And they were willing to take the drugs and the human trafficking and the terrorists as oops, okay, well, that's the price you pay. How many we've lost? We lose 100,000 Americans a year due to fentanyl. But the Biden administration they literally welded the gates open so people could just cruise across at their leisure, and they're all bringing drugs with them.
Well, and you're going to see when the numbers finally come out for 2025, you're going to see that number go even higher, because 80% of fentanyl seized in the country, Q1, Q2, laced with xylazine, which is a horse tranquilizer. So Narcan doesn't work against xylazine, and almost all the fentanyl's been stepped on with xylazine, and it's a tranquilizer that shuts your whole body down. Your heart stops beating, your lungs stop functioning. It's but
you get a really good high right before you die.
Right. So the next one up here that I've got, let me share it with everybody, is Sarah Adams was recently on the Dave Rutherford show, and Dave's a former operator. I don't know him, and he's relatively new on the scene. And I'm not going to read through this because this is his podcast, and as you can see, it's 48 minutes long. What I am going to do is I'm going to grab this link and send it out to everybody in the live chat. He's a smart guy, and again, I don't know him. He's relatively new on the scene. I sent his team an email asking if he'd like to come on our podcast. We shall see. We have a bunch of mutual friends, of course. But I've already watched this, and it's a good watch. So if you're looking for the latest update from Sarah and some really good questions, check out the David Rutherford show. So next one up is another person who's been doing great work with regards to 9/11 2.0. And if you're not following them, you should be. And that's Apex Guard. So at APEXGUARD Apex Guard HQ. Highly recommend that you follow this person. I don't know if it's a male or female, but whoever it is does a great job. So let me read you their update on 9/11 2.0. So Homeland attack. There are three parts to the upcoming Islamic Army attack on U.S. soil. Attack on aviation industry, siege on Washington, D.C., attack where you live, work, and play. It's not a prediction. If people are unaware, we've been running human networks into Al-Qaeda for a decade now. Of course, it was to identify the terrorists who attacked us in Benghazi. But since the fall of Kabul, a lot of those Libyans went to Afghanistan, right? That's a quote from Sarah Adams. So they want to do another aviation plot, but this time their intent is to take down about a dozen airlines, which should say airliners, using suicide bombers. Another quote from Sarah. They want to do, it's kind of like a siege on DC is the best way to put it, very Mumbai style. Another quote from Sarah Adams. They want to have attacks where you live, work, and play. These are community level attacks. So we're talking churches, shopping centers, hospitals. Again, all of these are Sarah Adams quotes. Their focus is really on communities that have a higher percentage of a veteran population, because they want the veterans to feel in their hometowns what they felt in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. That's supposed to be the feel of the peace. So interesting synopsis on the part of Apex Guard there. The only, and I'm not saying I don't believe it, the only intelligence that I've seen that has mentioned anything with regards to DC is that update from Sarah. And because Clede's under the weather today, I didn't really have a chance to ask him about it. I'm not surprised if that's the case. But one of the things that Clede and I've talked about at length this week, Jeff, and you can probably speak to it as well. So this Islamic army led by Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all these other terrorists that are part of it, they have this plan, their plan for 9/11 2.0 that we've covered ad nauseum. Simultaneous, complex, coordinated terrorist attacks on 10 to 15 American Tier 2 cities that have one Tier 1 trauma center. And so the DC angle is a little bit new, but again, I couldn't ask Clede about it because he's under the weather. But the first thing I thought to myself was something he said this week. And he said, if opportunity presents itself to make a big splash, whether it be before or after 9/11 2.0, they will absolutely take advantage of that. Al-Qaeda in particular, if they feel that they can cause a really big, historical terrorist attack event, whatever you want to call it, they will. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff? Because Khalid posited, and I have no reason not to believe him, that if Haqqani were to overthrow the Taliban in Afghanistan, that it would probably accelerate the attack window. So Sarah has set the attack window mid-December to mid-February, but Khalid had some intelligence that basically said that if Haqqani gets in, takes over Afghanistan, you're looking at as early as mid-October. How opportunistic are these guys, countered by how pragmatic they are? Because we've commented how many times they hold grudges for hundreds of years, generations. So usually pragmatism and opportunism don't go hand in hand, but it seems like that might be the case.
Well, you can be pragmatic in knowing that you see an opportunity to do something that's going to achieve your goal, be it sooner or later. Why wouldn't you take it? If you're planning an attack that, say, kills 100 people, and then something comes along, drops in your lap where you can kill 1,000, well, the 1,000 to them is better than the 100. So why wouldn't they take it? And it happens all the time. You'll see people you see some of these half-assed terrorist attacks, and a lot of times it's just an opportunity. They're in the right place at the right time. They've got a vehicle. They've got something that, okay, I'll just drive into this crowd and wipe them out. Probably not something they were planning for weeks or months at a time. It was, okay, I've got access to a box truck. First big crowd I see, maybe on a religious holiday, I'll just drive into it. We saw that. What was the one where the guy ran into the Christmas parade and killed a bunch of people? Was that something he'd been planning since June? No. It was probably just a target of opportunity. He just decided, okay, I'm going to martyr myself, so let's do it this way. So yeah, they also have spent a lot of time encouraging lone wolf attacks. And by their very definition, they're not coordinated. They're not complex. It's one guy going out and doing something, killing some people to get on the news.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The deeper you get into this, there are distinct differences between all of these terrorist groups. So, Al-Qaeda, again, is looking to have a big impact, a big splash, like taking down the World Trade Centers. That was an Al-Qaeda style of, regardless of conspiracy theories one way or the other. And I don't believe 100% of the official narrative, but that's another story for another night. Suffice it to say that the airplane plot is rather interesting. We haven't covered it in depth. And I had a conversation with Sarah when she was on. We were talking backstage, and she said the whole airplane component to 9/11 2.0 was actually Osama bin Laden's idea from the mid-90s, the Bojanka, Bojanka. It's a made-up word. And what it originally looked like would say there's a plane leaving Dresden, Germany, that terrorists would get on there, plant bombs under the seats. Then the plane lands in England. They get off. Then the plane carries on for America. And it's timed so that when it goes over an American city at a relatively low altitude, getting ready to land, it blows up. And now you have debris and body parts blowing all over the place. And by doing it with multiple planes on the same day, she said Osama bin Laden knew full well that if they could pull that off, it would shut down air traffic internationally for a very long time, because they'd be scratching their heads trying to figure out how in the hell did those bombs get on those planes, especially if they were to blow up, say, a dozen of them. I think she said it was that 12 to 15 range that was part of it. When I talked to her last time, she said that she thinks that Al-Qaeda's plan now, because of updated intelligence that she's seeing, is that while ISIS cells are occupying these soft targets in the tier 2 cities, that Al-Qaeda goes to the airports, hijacks 2 or 3 planes on the ground in each of those airports, and shortly after taking off, or when they're coming into approach another city at low altitude, they blow them up, including themselves, which is a little bit different than Bojangles, but the same effect. Imagine a dozen planes blowing up at low altitude across American cities, and body parts and plane parts flying all over. Fairly traumatizing for sure. You're on mute, Jeff.
There's a history of this. I mean, if you look, okay, you can go back to Middle Eastern terrorists hijacking airplanes starting back in the 1970s and all the way through the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Putting a bomb on a plane that you're not on. Okay, the Libyans did that with Pan Am 103, the one that blew up over Lockerbie.
Mm-hmm.
Before 9/11, Al-Qaeda had tried to, they had a plan to hijack multiple airlines in East Asia, mostly out of the Philippines and places like that. But it got disrupted. It was, people found out about it and they arrested the people. And so it never happened. Most Americans are unaware of it because it didn't happen here. And Americans, at least American media, is like, well, if it doesn't affect me, why do I care? And so that's why you don't hear about these things. They have had a running fascination with airplanes, I swear to God, since the Wright brothers. And so, an airplane can be a flying missile, for Christ's sakes. 9/11, they just said, let's hijack planes going across the country. So they're carrying a lot of gas, do it first thing in the morning when people are kind of half awake, and then fly them into buildings. It's simple. It's coordinated, but it really isn't that hard to do. And our airport security at the time was, at best. They weren't carrying guns. They weren't carrying bombs. They were carrying freaking box cutters.
Right. Yeah. Mark's got an interesting comment. A look at the Muslims working in the airports. A valid point. Cindy and I, when we were walking through the Atlanta airport on our last trip to Vegas, we could hear this humming and hawing stuff. And we come upon, there's a hallway off to the side that leads outside where the jetways are. And there's 4 of them in there on their rugs, doing their prayer stuff and everything. I got to tell you, it was pretty unsettling to both Cindy and I. We were just like, WTF, like, these are the people who work in this airport. And, it's just got bad juju written all over it.
9/11, a lot of we were seeing contacts with Somalis who worked at Hartsfield International Airport as airplane cleaners. Want to know about someone who's got unlimited access to an airplane? The person who has to clean it. Yeah. You look at baggage handlers. You look at, the guys who drive the fuel trucks. All those people are behind security. They have access to those aircraft. And you have a guy smuggles in a bomb, puts it in his truck, goes to work, has it in his lunchbox. All he has to do, if he's a baggage handler, when he's loading baggage, he just has to shove the bomb in somebody's luggage.
Yeah.
When he's loading the plane.
Yep, 100% valid point. And when you were mentioning, how the American press doesn't cover a lot of this stuff that happens outside of the country, this one's usually good for shock. I think most of our audience is up to speed on it, but lots of people aren't, and that's the religionofpeace.com. I've been following this guy for over 20 years, and when most people see these numbers, they can't believe it. So Islamic terrorists, so right where my cursor is here, Islamic terrorists have carried out more than 48,263 deadly terror attacks since 9/11 1.0. That's not number of casualties. That's the number of terrorist attacks. And if you look over here, he keeps a running tally, atrocity of the week. So Mozambique, woman among 4 beheaded. And this is all done by radical jihadi radical Islamic people. And if you go and you do look at the report, so Jihad report, September 2025, and you go into the list of attacks, they actually have a 30-day running tally of these things. So check this out. Over the past 30 days, there were 123 Islamic attacks in 18 countries in which 608 people were killed and 385 were injured. TROP, which stands for the Religion of Peace, does not catch all attacks. Not all attacks are immediately posted. And each of these has a story that goes with it that you can click through to and do all of your own research. But this is just the past 30 days. That's the last 30 days. Like, look at some of these. 63 people killed in Nigeria, Boko Haram. Massacred 63 Christians and injured another 50. The first column is murdered. The second column is injured. Here's another one. I have no idea. Oh, Natoyo must be Dominican Republic, DRC. 71 people killed, 100 injured, at least 70 people at a funeral are gathered and then hacked to death by Islamists. I mean, this is horrific stuff.
I think it's Democratic Republic of Congo.
That's it. You got it. Thank you. As I'm saying it, I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't sound right. But anyway, it's been a long week.
The Democrat National Re-Election Committee. So
that makes more sense. But thank you for catching that. So anyway, most people, when you show them these things, you get one or two reactions. You get people who are gobsmacked. You got other people who say, it can't be true. I've never heard of this. It can't be true.
Yeah.
Which, is stick your head in the sand, blah, 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 blah. It's not happening, right? So anyway, let's move on so we can get into the main topic. And this is not part of the main topic. This leads into it perfectly, though. And very well said at the top here. Digital ID equals control. In China, if you're blacklisted by social credit system, you're banned from traveling with long-range bus, train, plane, staying at high-end hotels, driving a car, even getting on the internet. All services require your digital ID to log in China. So this is a 40-second spoof video on the Brit card, which is what Sturmer is trying to focus on. Oh my golly. Let's start this over. Keir Starmer. Golly. Third time's a charm. Keir Starmer.
I know you don't drink. Maybe you should.
Golly. Struggling here. This is what the leader of Britain, Keir Starmer, is trying to force on the British people, and they will have no choice but to adopt this Brit card. 40-second video.
Can I see your Brit card, please?
I don't have one. I don't have a smartphone.
Can I get another pint, please? Sorry, sir. Your Brit card says you've exceeded your alcohol quota for this week.
Sorry, sir. Your Brit card says you've already flown twice this year. We're having to restrict passengers with higher than average emissions profiles.
Sorry, I'm afraid your funds have been temporarily frozen. Your recent social media post did not align with the government's narrative.
Sorry, I'm afraid your Brit card says you cannot purchase any more meat this week as part of our commitment to achieving net zero.
I've just logged in using my Brit card and it's saying I've already had 3 hours of internet today and it's locked me out.
And I mean, we've predicted this for quite some time now. I mean, they've been doing this in China for years as part of their social credit score. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to connect that to things like 15-minute cities that the WEF is promoting. And they're trying to make it sound like, it's good for the environment. It'll be good for you. Everything that you need in your life will be a maximum 15-minute walk. And then, of course, the next part to it is, well, wait a minute. You jaywalked. So you lost points on your social credit score. You can't leave the 15-minute city. You'll have to earn the right to do that back again in the future, sort of thing. And I mean, my wife and I for years have been saying, so does life imitate art or does art imitate life? Because you can watch movies on this topic and then the stuff starts to come to fruition. You think that's just too coincidental to be a coincidence, especially when you don't believe in coincidences. But anyway, that's a big part of the topic that we're going to cover tonight in this, 10 years after 9/11 2.0. And basically I would originally say the erosion of civil liberties, but I think a better word is the rape of our civil liberties.
Yeah.
more descriptive. Before we get into that, I just want to show people who are new to our podcast, and we're getting a lot of new people. If you go to survivaldispatch.news, that takes you to our Substack. If we're broadcasting, it's always at 7 p.m. Eastern. Monday to Friday is like clockwork. Occasionally on weekends, more so Sundays than Saturdays, but 7 p.m. The video will be at the top. So this is obviously the video that we're on right now. When we're not live, you can still access it through the situation report, which is always the current situation report is always the featured article up here. And if you click on it and you haven't seen a sit rep before, we published these earlier in the day, and there's all kinds of information on this particular episode. And if you're a subscriber, well, put it this way, if you're a free subscriber, you get everything down to my signature. If you're a paying subscriber, you also get our sources. And for people who pay $7.99 a month or $74.99 a year, which gets them 2.5 months for free, they also get automatically enrolled in the Survival Dispatch emergency notification system. So we send notifications out by email. You get an invite to our private signal chat, which is just, it's insane the amount of intelligence that gets shared in there. And so the SDENS notifications go there as well. And if you buy one of these radios, and by my estimation, middle of next week will be the end of this deal. The first 1,000 of these radios that they sell are $399 for a pair, and it comes with global service for free for the life of the device. But once the first 1,000 are sold, think of it like a Kickstarter. The price is going to go to $1,140 for 2 of them, and then you have to pay for your network access somewhere between $29 and $65 a year. So the cool thing is with these radios is that they're GMRS and LTE. LTE is, of course, the last generation of cell phone data. Great way to get a mass message out to people really quickly. And then let me show you what they look like. Once you sign up as a Guardian, we'll go ahead and we'll send you a QR code so you can join. But this is what the radios look like. As you can tell, they're pretty small, but we've been doing a bunch of testing now, probably for a better part of a month. And for what they cost, this is a good supplement to your communication strategy, right? Garmin InReach minis, radios like that. If you're technical and you want to get into it, nothing beats shortwave radios, high frequency, but the learning curve is quite a bit steeper than anything else. But in a Walking Dead situation where everything is gone, shortwave HF is all that's going to be left for us mere peasants. Anyway, with that being said, survivaldispatch.news. At the very least, sign up for a free account. You'll get our daily situation reports. You get our weekly watch guide. You get early access to JJ Morris's instructional videos. And if you're a paying member, in addition to getting enrolled in SDENS and in addition to getting an invite to Signal, you get all 37 Survival Dispatch Insider e-magazines. They sell for $9.99 each. So it's $370 worth of e-mags. You get all of that for free when you sign up for $7.99 a month or $74.99 for the year. And we appreciate everybody's support. Where there's always people who say things like, well, you should be giving this information away for free. Jeff can attest to the fact that I work 16, 17, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we work these kind of hours. Khalid does as well. So we can bring you guys the truth on stuff. And if we didn't have a way to defray our expenses, I mean, again, we spend $4,500 a month on software. We wouldn't be able to bring you this information. So we're not asking for a handout. This is what we do. We bring you the truth, and it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And the people who say we should do it for free, well, if you knew how much money I've invested into Survival Dispatch and lost because of a number of different things that have happened over the years, you might change your opinion just a little bit. Anyways, moving on from there, let's get into the main topic here, Jeff. So let me set the stage for this. We're 10 years post 9/11 2.0, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we have governments at all levels essentially eroding our civil liberties. Everything in life is the same, right? The first thing you do is decide what you want. The second thing you do is decide what you're willing to give up to get it. Unfortunately, the government has a bigger say than you and I have. And if they say, well, we're going to take this civil liberty away because if it saves just one life, it's worth it, which I vehemently disagree with. That's like you're trying to short circuit Darwinism instead of letting stuff just run its natural course. But again, we've seen it how many times now. COVID was a great indicator.
Yeah.
You couldn't ask for a better indicator of absolute power corrupting people. Absolutely. Especially the crazy Democrat states. I mean, we were pretty fortunate here in Florida, but I want to say thank you, by the way, Mr. Van. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. Very kind of you. So I could, if that's what happened over the flu bug, imagine what happens over mass terrorist attacks that take, hundreds of thousands of American lives. So again, set yourself 10 years down the road. You've got a massive psychological toll over that 10 years, right? We will go from the most permissive environment in the world to very restricted, and you're going to be monitored at every turn. Your money is going to be monitored, what you can do with your money, where you can go, where you can't go. I mean, it's like being a rat trapped in a lab is the best analogy that I can think of. So let's roll with this a little bit, Jeff, and get into it. If I just asked you out of the blue, being a former CIA guy, and said, hey, if we have these complex coordinated terrorist attacks across the country, what do you think the country looks like immediately thereafter? And then 10 years later, I'd like to hear what your answer would be.
Immediately thereafter, I think you're going to have chaos and paranoia because we're not prepared for it, even though we should be. The government is going to be running 20 different directions at the same time, but with no clear objective of where they're going or what they're going to do when they get there. And
just so I understand, so you're saying very reactionary sort of thing, like throwing up
they're going to,
checkpoints and stuff like that.
It could be, you don't know, because they don't know what they want to do. They don't know what to do. And therefore some may do checkpoints and lock down neighborhoods, and others may do something completely different because they're not prepared. They don't have a plan. And when you don't have a plan, you tend to throw spaghetti against the cabinet and see if it sticks. And so you're going to get people who are going to try all sorts of stupid stuff. We saw it during COVID. They went to, don't have a mask. Well, first it went to, we're out of masks, so you need to make them. And we had little old ladies around here hand making masks. They were useless, but they made them. Then you had, okay, well, you don't need a mask because there's not enough to go around. To then you had someone says, well, you definitely need a mask. No, you need 2 masks. And you got a social distance. And they were just throwing every piece of crap out there, every piece of crap advice. And never did they ever admit, oops, we were wrong about that. They've never come out and said, it turns out the vaccines don't stop transmission or infection. They've never really said that. They just said you need more vaccines. They just doubled down on stupid. They've never addressed the fact that viruses will go through an N95 mask because viruses are smaller than the smallest pore in an N95 mask. 100 times smaller than the smallest pore.
Just to be clear, Jeff's an engineer and he actually did the math on this one.
I did the math.
Yeah.
But there's all these things that they're going to try everything. And most of it will not work. They'll never admit they were wrong, and they will keep it going no matter what. The people they'll lock up. So many people will go into condition black because they're not prepared. They don't know what to do. They'll probably lock themselves in their homes and not come out until quite literally they're starving to death and have to go get food. But I think longer term, if depending on who's in charge, we're probably going to end up looking like a police state. You're going to have roadblocks. You have to show your ID to get on a subway or a bus. You're not going to be able to go anywhere. They're going to lock down neighborhoods, and to go out of the neighborhood, you're going to say, here's my real ID. This is where I'm going. And they're going to move to a digital ID and digital currency. So and it's all going to be for safety. We're just trying to make sure the bad guys can't get a hold of guns and ammunition. Well, they're going to make sure nobody gets hold of guns and ammunition, and you're not going to be able to buy ammunition because I can guarantee you once they come out with the digital ID, that will be on the proscribed list. And they will say, it is to keep the terrorists from getting this stuff. But every nightmare scenario will be tried and applied at some point, maybe not all the way across the country. Some states, Texas and, Tennessee and Florida may go, yeah, we're not doing that here. But I can guarantee you on the left coast and the right coast, they're going to go full bore, Chairman Mao, we're in charge here, and they'll be interning people who complain and fight back. And by fight back, I don't mean literally fighting. I mean people who protest or won't do it, or do civil disobedience, saying no. People got arrested for going to church, for crying out loud.
Yeah,
and that was over a flu. What do you think they're going to do? You can't go to church. That makes you guys a target, so you can't go to church.
Yeah. And I mean, we had Arthur Pavlovsky on. You remember that night?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, they put him in jail.
They put him in jail. A very interesting pastor who left the communist East Bloc to come to Canada, and then he ends up being hammered during COVID. Interesting guy, but he's the longest-winded guest we've ever had. The rest of us were all
Believe me, I remember.
It was 60 minutes into his speech, and we were all like, okay, is it time? Are we done yet? Great story, great guy, but a little on the long-winded side. Let me put a little bit more meat on the bones here. So we left the front door open for 4 years, thanks to Obama, Brennan, and Biden, for lack of a better term. The DHS admits that they let 200,000 SIAs loose into the country, which has been also confirmed from J.J. Carroll. So special interest aliens. An SIA is a known terrorist or a known terrorist associate, full stop. If they're admitting to 200,000, the number's clearly higher than that. But even if you just keep it at 200,000, what that does is 9/11 2.0 kicks off the end of America as we know it, the end of the world as we know it. And forever thereafter, we basically become like the Middle East and Africa, where terrorist attacks are just a normal thing. They're happening on a daily, semi-daily basis. And that in turn drives this whole, I'm trying to think of the right word, maybe like institutionalization of security. This constant, checkpoints, rules, alerts, all kinds of new laws, along everything you can imagine that you just mentioned, and then some, right? So people's fear is always at a crazy high level. There's always this tension between maintaining security and trying to maintain, at least on our side, civil liberties. But again, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I don't think they give a shit about that other than taking it away, meaning, the powers that be sort of thing. What's the psychological effect, Jeff? I mean, when you were in during and after the fall of the Soviet Republic. What did that level of control or limits on society, what was the psychological impact of that in those Eastern Bloc countries, Russia, everything that was part of the USSR?
Yeah, and in the Warsaw Pact and Eastern Europe and all that, I think they broke down into a couple of different categories. There was the I'm on board with it crowd. I'm going to join the party that'll advance my career. And if I get high up in the party, I get access to the special grocery stores. I'll be able to get a car. All the privileges that we take for granted here, they had to earn, quote unquote, through the party. Then there were the ones who were defiant, the Solzhenitsyns and the Sakharovs, the people who said, this is not right. The people don't, shouldn't have to live this way. And then you had the ones who just were beat down by it and just succumbed to it. They didn't fight it. They didn't like it. It just was. And I knew a kid, he was Polish, and he remembers before he came to the United States, he was in Poland, and Poland owed so much money to the Russians or the Soviets. So all their money, all the hard currency they got from food exports went to the Soviet Union.
Wow.
And he said they had some Europeans come into his town and they wanted to show them how great things were. And so they invited locals into this shopping store, this grocery store. And he said they had cans of ham just piled up, and people were in shock because even though Poland was one of the largest pork producers in the world, they never had pork because it was all sold for hard currency to pay the Russians. And they were told they could put anything in their shopping carts. But as soon as the Westerners left, they had to give it all back. And he goes, that's when I knew we were starving because it was engineered. The food was there. We just weren't allowed to have it.
Wow. That's a crazy story. I appreciate you sharing that. I made a note, actually. I want to just back up and briefly mention it. There was talk out of the Obama administration way back when that they were going to go after ammunition, and they were going to try and make this claim that the Second Amendment protects your right, let's say, to have guns, but it doesn't mean that you have to have ammo or that you get to have ammo. I want to think that SCOTUS would have overruled that, but you're right. I mean, your guns aren't worth anything if they take all the ammunition away. So I just wanted to touch on that before we proceeded any further here. Give me some examples, Jeff. Again, I want to draw on your knowledge of what happened in the Soviet Republic as far as, did they ever do things where they said, like, we're going to put this like temporary measure in place and then it became permanent, or was that not a thing in the Soviet Republic?
Well, they had laws in place that looked good on paper. The Soviet Constitution guaranteed free speech, free movement, and all that. They just ignored it. They just never applied it. And as far as things that are temporary, as Ronald Reagan once said, there is nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing it now with they're having a fit because they put in Obamacare subsidies during COVID. And they've expired now. They expired on the 1st. And they're freaking out because now they want to extend them again. It's like they're supposed to be temporary subsidies because of COVID. COVID's over. It's been over for years. But because Obamacare doesn't really work without them, they're insisting on putting them in there. And you're going to see the same thing with tax credits for electric vehicles. Those expired on the 1st as well. And car sales went through the roof last week because everybody's trying to get in on the last time to get those $7,500 tax credits. But I can guarantee you this month that you're going to see electric car sales tank because anyone who wants one probably already has one. And the people who were buying them were only affordable because of the tax credits. And a lot of the companies, Tesla would not have made any money if it weren't for tax credits. Right. They were selling the tax credits. Nothing against Elon Musk. But, if you've got to pay people to take a product, you don't have a good product or a viable product. But all those temporary things always get extended. The Rural Electrification Agency was put in place in the 1930s during the Great Depression to bring electricity to rural America. Okay, well, last time I checked, you won't find a place in America without electricity, but the REA was still going strong when Reagan was around, and he was saying, why does this still exist? And it was actually providing electricity to golf courses and country clubs.
Wow.
Because they just won't get rid of it.
My mind always goes to the implementation of income tax. So I personally think Pete Hegseth makes some compelling points in his book to say that around the Civil War is when things started getting really corrupt at the federal level. But I think that the beginning of rigged elections started with Woodrow Wilson. And Woodrow Wilson, of course, his administration is the one that instituted this temporary income tax to fund World War I. And here we are, over a century later, and we still have it. So it's just one of those things that I think of that's become institutionalized, that was supposed to be a temporary thing. But before we pivot into the second segment, Jeff, just off the top of your head, give me some examples of security trade-offs that Americans just accept now that in the not too distant past, there's no way we would accept them.
The fact that they can track you everywhere you go by your cell phone. Before you picked up the phone in your house, you called somebody and you hung up. But now, and then you got in your car and you drove. No one knew where you were going. Mm-hmm. Now everybody knows where you're going, and they don't question it. The government, if you're a suspect, can pull up your Google search history. Can you imagine 30, 40 years ago if they said, Okay, we're going to keep track of every newspaper you read, every article you read. We're going to be looking at that. People would not allow that. But now they do it and they don't know it. A lot of this is just because they don't know it. The government, you think you're sending an encrypted message, but the government always insists on having a back door to the program. And that's where Pavel Durov got in trouble with the French, because they were saying, yeah, you got to take down this chat. You've got to give us access to Telegram. And he basically told them to pound sand. And he's not allowed to leave the country now. Now, why do they want that?
Also, so Telegram was 100% open source, meaning those of us who can program could look at the code and discern what it was doing. Whereas closed source proprietary software is like buying a car with the hood welded shut.
Yeah.
There is now a chunk of code in Telegram that is no longer open source, and it's closed source. And nobody but Pavel Durov and his inner circle knows what it is. And it's probably exactly what you're saying. It's probably a backdoor.
Yeah. And, he was insisting he wouldn't put one in, but they arrested him and now he's out. Now he's not allowed to leave the country. But originally they said, oh, this is to stop sex traffickers. Okay. No one wants sex traffickers and child porn. But what he got in trouble with them for is they asked him or told him to take down chats in Romania and Moldova, I think it was, that were for the opposition party that they didn't like. What does that have to do with kiddie porn? The answer is absolutely nothing. It may be put in for kiddie porn, but that's not to say someone's go, wow, we can use this for a lot of other stuff. You look at Carnivore, the program that there was an FBI one and an NSA one. There were two different ones. One was basically sucking up every email. They pull up PIN registers for every phone in America, so they know who called who and what tower it bounced off of. And how is that not surveillance? And it's surveillance without a warrant. They didn't go to court for that. And they've even admitted that under the Patriot Act, they violated the Fourth Amendment like 275 million times because they were collecting information on U.S. citizens, something they said they wouldn't. Again, temporary program, said they wouldn't do, but then they did.
So let's do an audience poll here, and we'll keep an eye on the results, and we're going to circle back on it. If you use the predictive text feature on your smartphone, or if you use voice to text on your smartphone, either or, put a 1 in the live chat. If you use both of them, put a 2 in the live chat. And if you use neither of them, put a 0 in the live chat. So predictive text, you're writing something on your phone and it's trying to anticipate what the next word or, the next sentence is, and you can just hit that and it fills it in for you automatically. That's predictive text. Obviously, voice to text, talking into your phone and having it translated. So if you use one or the other, put a 1. If you use both of them, put a 2. If you use neither, put a 0. And there's some pretty serious privacy implications here that I'll come back to in just a minute. I got a note on my pad here so I don't forget it. And it'll be interesting to see what our audience says. So I'm looking over in Rumble. We've got a handful of 1s. YouTube is a pretty good mixture of 1s and 0s, a couple 2s up top. But again, we'll come back to that very shortly. And while we're kind of waiting for that to ruminate, let me find something that's kind of interesting and ties into what we're discussing here. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll go through it. And I'm going to put a link in the live chat so that people can look at this. So as I mentioned, I went to a bunch of different AIs and I said, theoretically, what would Patriot Act 2.0 look like? And again, I got answers all over the board, but I think the one from Chat GPT, which really surprised me, by the way, is probably the most realistic of all the major AIs. Now, I did some other AIs like Venice, and it gave me the results. The reason I'm not linking to Venice is because I don't think most people have Venice. It's a very, it's a specialty. It's a niche AI. Claude had some pretty interesting results, but of the top level, most common ones, Chat GPT kind of blew me away. So what would drive Patriot Act 2.0? And so you've got these evolving threats from terrorism, whether it be physical terrorism or cyber attack sort of thing. And essentially the authorities right now feel that they have gaps in their tool set. They've been very vocal about this, saying that, you know, the FISA surveillance laws don't go far enough, which I can't believe got renewed again last year. Blows me away. And when they renewed that, by the way, so our Congress critter at the time was Mike Waltz, former Green Beret. We voted for him several times. And son of a bitch, if he didn't vote against requiring warrants to have FISA surveillance on you and me, but no warrants if you served in Congress. And I wrote to his office several times, and I didn't vote for him. Last election, I didn't vote for any congressional rep for our area. I'm not going to vote for the crazy left-wing people, but I couldn't give him my vote in good conscience. So they want to expand their rights to spy on you while limiting the rights of law enforcement to spy on them. So long story short, look at some of the things that are suggested here that come up. So mass bulk data collection and metadata. So what's the likely proposed expansion? Broader authority to collect telephone, internet, location, metadata of large populations without any restrictions whatsoever. And I mean, this is stuff you should have to have a warrant to gather. And like Jeff said, prior to smartphones and the interwebs, they would have had to get a warrant to track these things, what your purchases were, you know, what you were reading, so on and so forth. Access to third-party records and devices. So easier access to business records, what you store in the cloud, what content is on your devices, IoT data. IoT means Internet of Things. When IoT came around, maybe the big initial jump of IoT would be maybe 10, 11 years ago. It stands for taking a dumb device, putting sensors on it, and then reporting it across the network, across the internet. And the volume of data that's come from IoT devices. So think of like your smartwatch as an IoT device. If you have anything digital on your fridge, which I still can't get my head wrapped around, that's an IoT device. You got a Nest thermostat or something like that, that's an IoT device. Pretty much anything that reports across the network.
I have an oven.
There you go.
That is an IoT device.
So they're going to essentially, the hypotheses here is that they would push for that type of data, financial data, health data, search histories. Moving on to the next one, enhanced real-time or proactive interception. So getting an expansion of wiretaps and roving surveillance, APIs, application programming interfaces, to intercept communications or metadata in real time across all of your devices simultaneously. No warrants required. Client-side scanning and algorithmic detection. So basically saying that you have to have AI running on all of your devices, constantly tracking what you're doing, looking for patterns, and reporting that information back in to the mothership.
Well, they already do that.
Sure,
How
they
many
do.
people have searched for something on Google or Amazon, and then they get an ad for a related product instantly?
Well, if you look at if you dig deep into the terms of services for every app out there, it says that they have the right, you know, to access the microphone, the camera, and to gather anonymous data, which is bullshit.
Bullshit, yeah.
You know,
yeah, we've talked about stuff, and my wife will get an ad for it.
Yep.
Because, you know, we have Alexas in the house. Now, we've put it in a closet so it can't hear us. We go over there, we want to turn it on, we have to actually go over there and open the door and ask it for something, because we have music and stuff that plays through it, but I don't want them in the room with me.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, and a great example. So moving on. So algorithmic risk scoring. This is an interesting one. So basically, whatever algorithm that they're running on your devices, whether it's a computer or a phone, an IoT device, to predict what you're going to do. And there's been quite a bit of discussion in European countries and Canada in this, that the holy grail for these guys is to be able to use artificial intelligence to predict that you are going to break the law, predict exactly what you're going to do, which this goes beyond 1984 and George Orwell.
This is Minority Report.
There you go. It's
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
Crime.
Jeff, you can probably speak to this cross-agency data sharing and fusion. So right now, one agency relative to another, there are probably not enough, but there's some checks and balances that don't allow agencies to freely give data to other agencies. But I think Patriot Act 1.0 weakened that already. And Patriot Act 2.0 would weaken it even more.
Yeah, there's a couple of issues there. One is self-interest. You know, if you have control over data, you have power. And if you readily and freely give up that information to another organization, you've given up some of your power, because what you can do is say, okay, I'll give you what you want, but in exchange, you have to give me what I want. And so there's horse trading involved. But when I was, with the agency, we worked a lot with the FBI, but there was a thing, they called it the Chinese wall. It was to keep, we did not have access to criminal investigations. I could not ask about them, nothing. Okay. And they couldn't, we wouldn't give them information on any of our intelligence operations for the most part. But if there were counterterrorism, we would share data because there was that crossover. But there are times when even within the FBI, an intel op is segregated from criminal. And a lot of that is because a lot of people may have access to the criminal stuff that do not need access to the counterintelligence stuff. But you can see that going away over time.
I figured you'd have some insight on that. I appreciate that. So this next one's kind of crazy. Expanded extraterritorial cross-border reach. Easier access to data stored overseas, cooperation mandates, bypassing foreign resistance. So this would be what Europe is trying to do these days with like the DSA, the Digital Security Act, and forcing their laws on us here in America. And, this is why I say America is the firewall between globalism and freedom, because we're the only armed population on Earth, at least by a significant margin. And as long as they can't, kinetically take us down, they can't force all of this down our throats. They're doing a good job of getting a lot of it forced down our throats. But I don't think many Americans would put up with some of the stuff that's happening in Europe, for example. I mean, with that being said, that stuff last night with Nick Sordor being jailed is reminiscent of what's been going on in Europe for years now. Yeah. Well, you wait a minute, you said something bad about this immigrant or whatever, therefore we have to lock you up.
Yeah, you lock somebody up for saying, screw Hamas. That ain't going to fly here.
No.
You're going to have, people storming the jail because that's garbage. And everybody knows it. First Amendment. And a lot of people wouldn't, cops say, we're here to arrest you for a tweet. And there are people going to say, I've got a First Amendment right to say what I want. You come in my house, I'm going to consider it breaking and entering, and I'm going to respond accordingly because you have no legal reason to be in my home.
Yeah,
I hate to say it, we need more of that. Now, it's not going to be your local cops; they don't care. It's going to be your feds. And if Kamala had won, it'd probably be on us today. Look what they did to 9/11 people.
Yeah,
I mean not 9/11. I'm sorry, January 6th. I mean, they just walked through an open door, stayed within the velvet ropes, and they hunted them down and put them in prison.
So let's revisit the poll that we just did. And I would say a small majority of people had the number one. Not a whole lot of people had the number two. And quite a few people, almost half had zero. But the majority would have been from all the different platforms we're broadcasting to. When I look at the results from all of them, the ones got the most votes by a negligible margin over the zeros. So why did I ask those questions? So let's say you're using an application that you believe to be secure and that you have this encrypted connection. Everything that has predictive text enabled in is not done locally on your phone. It's done in the cloud. So you are basically, everything you're typing is going up to the cloud in clear text, recorded in clear text on the other end. so that the AI can do your predictive text and send it back to you. So essentially, they have a record of everything that you typed into the phone. Now, they may not be able to see, obviously, what the other party is typing if it's truly an encrypted app with no backdoor. But WhatsApp, for example, people thought that was secure for years. And there's multiple backdoors for multiple governments around the world to read everything that you did. But assuming that you're not using a compromised application, all your stuff is in the cloud. Same goes for voice to text. Voice to text is not executed on your phone. It's done in the cloud. So you speak into your phone, everything is done up in the cloud. It blasts it back down to your phone, and there it is. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of compute power or network bandwidth for plain ASCII text characters. And you've just basically given up half the conversation. So to those of you who have that stuff disabled, like me, good job. And the only reason I have it disabled is because I'm a tech guy. I've been doing this for decades, and I know what nefarious things go on behind the scenes when it comes to that stuff. For those of you who don't have that turned off, it's like everything else in life. First thing you do is decide what you want. Next thing you do is decide what you're willing to give up to get it. So if you want the functionality of those things, you're going to give up some of your privacy, full stop. And it's once it goes to the cloud, it doesn't matter if you delete something from your device or not. It's stored forever and ever and ever. It's never going away. It's always out there. So with that being said, let me reel this back in and get into chapter 2, or segment 2, I should say. So surveillance, intelligence, state power. And in this part, Jeff, I want to discuss the expansion of mass surveillance tools. So think cameras on every building, like the stuff the Chinese have, where they have facial recognition. They literally track everybody where they go. They have it to a large extent in London these days as well. And then they combine it, right? So they take all this mass surveillance tools, like the cameras that are tracking people, combine it with the tracking of your phone, and they merge it all together. All the metadata comes together, and AI reassembles it, and it turns into what's referred to as big data. They've got big data tied to everybody out there, what they're doing. So Patriot Act 2.0 would, of course, result in, I don't think it's a good evolution, but the evolution of legal aspects. So we're back to FISA courts, secret interpretations, which is kind of a hallmark of the FISA courts. And I'm going to have you speak to that in a second, Jeff. And then I think there's a whole PR piece that goes with this, of normalizing all of this stuff, telling people, well, we have to have this because of what happened on 9/11 2.0 or what happened in yesterday's terrorist attack. This is why we need to gather this information. This is why you shouldn't be upset that you have to give it up. But invariably, what will happen, people are immediately going to say, you're infringing on my free speech. And many people, like myself, would say, I don't agree to this at all. I don't agree with this as an invasion of my privacy. Well, what's the repercussions doing that now? As far as, your social credit score just dropped by 100 points. Looks like you're not leaving your 15-minute city, for the rest of your life or something along those lines. And I think that we'll see a lot of court challenges along the way. And I hate to say this, but this is me being black-pilled these days, Jeff. But I think a lot of it will be nothing but theater, and they'll get exactly what they want. Back to absolute power corrupts absolutely. So first and foremost, Jeff, speak to the whole FISA process for people who don't understand what a abhorrent thing it's been.
Yeah, the FISA process, as designed originally, was not as abhorrent as people think. It's what it's evolved into. I remember I'd be working with the Bureau on a counterterrorist case, and they would want to get FISA on the subject. And a FISA, it's a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act or whatever. And they had pre-selected, they had these judges. And if you wanted to get essentially a secret warrant against somebody for national security reasons, you had to go to the court, and you had to prepare a packet for the court to justify it, saying, this is the information we have, here are the sources, this is what we think he's doing, this is what we've seen so far. And you'd be heartened actually to find the Bureau guys, the agents, hated putting these packets together because they were such a pain in the ass. And they're like, crap, man, to get a FISA. And they would, they'd be 15, 20 pages long and then detailed. But what it did, it forced them to cross their T's and dot their I's, and to make sure because it was such kind of a pain in the ass to get, you only got it when you really needed it. You didn't just willy-nilly get a FISA. It was too much of a burdensome process. But that has obviously changed. And like we saw that with the whole Russian collusion hoax, the Bureau put in a FISA for so they could monitor one of Trump's aides. I can't remember which one it was now, maybe Carter Page. And they lied in the FISA application. Well, that's a felony. Mm-hmm. You lied to the judge. And that 1001 rule applies to them too in that situation. But they still did it. And it didn't get caught for years. And when it did, the FBI attorney, they pinned it on one guy, and he got convicted. And I don't even think he got disbarred. I think he got like probation. He may have been terminated from the Bureau, but he was a lawyer and didn't even lose his law license for submitting false information to a court. So that's the problem is, there are checks and balances, but they're obviously not enforced. And you violate someone's basic principles of human rights, like the Fourth Amendment says you're entitled to privacy on your person and papers, but they just blew that out of the water, and nobody paid the price for that. I'm sorry, a slap on the wrist doesn't count. That guy should have been in prison, and everybody above him should have been fired. The Russians call that the vertical stroke. You get the guy who did it, and you go up and you fire everybody in his chain of command. There was a kid from, I can't remember was it England or Denmark, who actually flew a Piper Cub into the Soviet Union and landed in Red Square.
I remember this. Okay.
Kid got arrested, blah, blah, blah. But everyone from the radar operator who should have seen him all the way up to the Deputy Minister of Defense got fired. Everybody in that chain of command got fired. You know what? They didn't do that anymore. We don't do that. Look at the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Nobody got fired from that, except the people who complained about it.
Right. Yeah. That exposed it.
Yeah.
Interesting comment here from A to Z unfolding. Los Angeles City Hall, 200 North Spring Street. After a vehicle intentionally crashed into the steps of the building, LAPD quickly responded. Driver claims bombs and weapons in car. Appreciate you adding that A to Z.
Thanks.
See maybe if we have a chance to get some more updates, or actually if you have updates, anybody has updates on that, and you put a link into the live chat, we'll try to cover that as it unfolds as well. Also, before I bring up the next question, if you see me constantly looking over to the right here, we had a guy show up at our front door a few weeks ago, 8:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning. My wife was in bed having a coffee, watching TV. She wasn't dressed appropriately to answer the front door. I was in the shower, and this guy who clearly didn't belong in our neighborhood walked up to our front door, did this, looking all around at everything, and looks right in the Ring doorbell. We've got a decorative steel door in front of the man door, and he starts pounding on it, and he's trying to look through it, and he's like, is anybody in there? Is anybody in there? Who knows? Could have been who knows what at the time, right? He's come back 3 times since then, and it's always been when I've been indisposed and I've gone back and checked the footage and seen it. He was at my front door this afternoon, and as soon as I got up, I think he heard the dogs barking and he ran away. But not to put my, tinfoil hat on too much, Sarah Adams has moved 3 times. She has nothing in her name whatsoever. I'm not on Sarah's level by any stretch of the imagination. But she moved, and then she had things like her phone bill was tied to her address, and Al-Qaeda found it, and they found her again, and they told her they were going to behead her, literally. Jane Doe that was on Sean Ryan's show, she couldn't show her face then. Now she won't even go on any podcast or anything like that because there are tools that can be used to sniff out somebody's IP address, even if you're not directly engaged in the transaction, and then physically locate them. Khalid has had multiple instances of people trying to kill him. He met with ISI a few weeks ago for the first time face-to-face in a long time, and they followed him back to his safe house without him knowing. And 2 nights later, he came under fire. It was sieged, and thankfully, he's got 8 men in his security detail, and there were 6 bad guys. And it obviously Khalid's here, so you can figure out what happened. But I've been getting a number of threatening emails and threatening comments on our social media. Some of it's probably just, internet commandos, call it what you will, bravado, or, the ball's bigger than the brain syndrome, whatever you want to call it. But sometimes you have to believe people. So I'm watching our camera system all the time now, because the only thing I can think of, Jeff, is that somebody probably gave them a few bucks to come and case our home. Now, if that has anything to do with Survival Dispatch News, I don't know. It could be, break and enter gangs, whatever the case may be. But it's bothersome, to say the least. So anyway, with that being said, let's get back on track here. This second one, quick open-ended question here. What surveillance tools or programs that have been unleashed over the past decade or so do you think have been like the biggest game changers that have had, whether it be the biggest game change as far as taking people's civil liberties away, taking privacy away, granting power, to the government, all governments at different levels, all that kind of stuff? Just out of curiosity, I mean, top 2 or 3, or even top 1 for that matter.
Well, for me, I think that we've always been able to manipulate cell phones forever, and people don't understand the degree to which they can be manipulated by an intelligence organization. But I think the one, there's beaconing. You can sew an RFID into somebody's clothing, and they can walk around a city. In places in China, so they have RFID readers all over the city. It's ostensibly for commercial purposes, so you can track shipments on trucks and things like that, but you can track people too. So someone can walk around the city. You don't even have to be following him or even have a camera on him. He'll just ping off the RF readers, and so you know where he is. But I think the biggest one, the most intrusive one, is probably the facial recognition systems, where you can just be walking down the street after having a beer with your wife, and they can tell you exactly where you are, and they can track you through those. And because there's a lot of surveillance systems out there, there's nothing to stop them from going into the archive tape and say, okay, before you were here, where were you? Where did you come from? And just go backwards in time and follow you all over the city. And if they can identify your car, and cars have all sorts of things that people don't think about. How many people have they can tell the pressure of their tires in their car when they're driving?
Right.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, those emit a signal. That signal can be read. So you can drive through, and if they identify the code for your valve stems on your Cadillac, then they can track you that way. They have license plate readers, they have everything else. They don't need to be behind you to follow you anymore.
Yeah, good point. Really, really good point. Somebody in the live chat said that, post a picture of our mystery guy here. So I just grabbed a screenshot off of our security camera stuff, and bear with me for a second.
Oh no, put it up.
And it's for whatever reason, when you drag and drop PNGs on top of Chrome, it wants to download the picture instead of showing it. So just bear with me here, and I'll share it here. So this screenshot that I'm fixing to show you, you can see that he's looking at our security cameras. It's not hard to tell what he's doing, but that's him there. And I don't think that this guy's particularly sophisticated, to be quite honest with you. Certainly doesn't look anything like people in our neighborhood. We live in a very old, established, upper middle class neighborhood. But where he's looking up like this. He's looking at security cameras. There's a Ring doorbell here that took
Isn't he the guy who tried to shoot Trump at the golf course?
Right.
That's what he looks like.
Yeah. Again, it's like Sesame Street. Which one doesn't belong? This guy doesn't belong in our neighborhood now.
And he's been back multiple times?
3 times that I know of now. The third time was today. This was a couple weeks ago on a Sunday. So either somebody paid him to case our place, or who knows, maybe he's, going door to door in the neighborhood for whatever nefarious reasons. But that's why when people see me, because I've had a couple of people say, how come you're always looking to the right over there? One, I'm surrounded in monitors. I've got 7 monitors at my workstation here. And 2, I'm watching the camera. I've got a 360-degree view of our property. So
Well,
anyway.
Another question is, how many older adult men walk around with a backpack on?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So either way, if you see me, my eyes darting off to the side, or you see me concentrating on something off to the right, that's what it is. Just keeping an eye open for our mystery visitor to come back again. All right, so getting back on track here. Great answer, by the way, to the last question. So coming from the intelligence community, Jeff, this is a very nebulous, open-ended question, but where's the tipping point between gathering legitimate information that could prevent, the next terrorist attack or the next thing versus infringing on people's constitutional rights? Because myself, I'm a libertarian, classic libertarian, lowercase L, not capital L. Those guys are lunatics. And I think the government shouldn't be involved in anything, to be quite frank. But obviously, I'm not the majority, or else we'd have good politicians in office.
Well, again, you always look at the first excuse they give, and it's probably a good one. It's what comes after. It's like, we're trying to stop kiddie porn. Okay, who's going to argue against stopping kiddie porn? But it never stops at that. Okay, now we got to stop maybe regular porn. Maybe we got to stop people trying to sell pot. Or maybe we got to, and it always expands until it becomes all intrusive. And they do the same thing with gun control laws. We got to stop these high capacity magazines and this and that. And before you know it, it's all gun-free zones, and you can't own a gun, and you can't, where you go like Australia, if you're fortunate enough to own a gun, it's got to be in a safe, disassembled with the ammunition somewhere else. It's like, what the hell's the point of having one then? But you always, if it's a legitimate law enforcement application, I don't have a huge problem with it, but it never stays there. It always just goes off the cliff.
Yeah. It's not creep. It's full speed, right?
It's not creep. It's a sprint.
Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly show a couple articles that came up while we were researching today's topic, and I'm not going to read them. I'm just going to show them. Then I'm going to put the links in the live chat on all the different platforms. And surprisingly enough, Jeff, there were a couple articles that I came across while I was doing research that were from sources that surprised me, put it that way, like sources that I wouldn't think of being as allies. All of them, all the ones that I'm going to paste in here are good. This is good. Rolling back the post 9/11 surveillance state. Really good article that basically makes the point of what we're making right now, is that they went too far, but like you said, they normalize it over time.
Yeah, and that's the plan.
Next one here. This is a pretty interesting report. It's 39 pages long. It's a PDF, as you can see. But the high costs of post 9/11 U.S. mass surveillance, and the context of the word cost isn't so much in dollars and cents as it is the high cost of the loss of civil liberties. So it's pretty decent as well. And the next one here, how technology and the world have changed since 9/11. It's another good one. Not surprised to see the Brookings Institute come out with that. When I see things that come from Vox and, Medium and stuff like that, I think to myself, that seems kind of fishy for them. But next one here, normalizing the exception, governmentally legal discourse and post 9/11 U.S. security. I would hazard to guess, Jeff, that unless somebody really takes an interest in this, because the legacy media doesn't cover this, people don't know just how much their privacy has been eroded over the past 24 years since 9/11 1.0.
Again, you get an ad for something you Googled. And people don't even think that's unusual now. And it's like, wait a minute, they're tracking everything you're doing, and they're sending you things to get money from you so you can buy it. It's not a convenience, it's an intrusion.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the last one I'm going to share for now. If y'all are on a laptop or desktop, my suggestion is just open these links in a new tab, and then you can come back to them at the end of the podcast and do your own research on that stuff. But at the end of the day, I think I hate to say it again, but the adage, absolute power corrupts absolutely. They take an inch and then they take a mile. They don't take an inch and then take a foot. They take an inch and then they take a mile. And there's a lot of stuff happening in our society that is not compatible with our Constitution. And a lot of people forget the Constitution doesn't grant us any rights at all. The Constitution is us telling the government what guidelines they're allowed to operate within. So, the first three words, we the people.
Right.
And we are granting the government authority to manage things like immigration, national defense, so on and so forth. And I somewhere along the line, civics classes got messed up and tried to convince people that somehow, the Constitution grants us rights, and it doesn't.
A senator from Virginia said that the government grants rights. And it's like, you're a senator. You are going to be the vice president of the United States, for Christ's sakes, and you don't even know what the Constitution means.
Exactly. I mean, a great example, absolutely fantastic example. I just want to quickly mention, if you head over to survivaldispatch.news, sign up for a free account. If you end up being a paying member, that's great. And we do appreciate the support, but you don't have to pay to get a lot of value. Plus, there's another part to this as well that I want to quickly show. Let me grab the link for it. This is what you could essentially call a self-licking ice cream cone. So let me get this up here and show it. We've been doing pretty good of staying in the top 10 on the Substack top 100 list for our category. And there's no fancy algorithm behind this whatsoever. The more people who sign up to follow your channel, doesn't matter if they're free or paying, over the previous 24 hours, gets you ranked on this list. Well, when you're in the top 5, top 10, the reason I say it's like a self-licking ice cream cone is because more people then see you, go to your Substack and sign up. And so it helps to keep you up there. So those people who can help us, by subscribing free, or paid or free, in both cases, it's great. It's very helpful, and it helps us with our mission. Our mission's simple: dispatch information so our fellow Americans and friends of America can survive in these very uncertain times. Full stop. That's what we do. That's why it's called Survival Dispatch.
Okay, who's that jerk in third place?
Yeah, the Keith Graves, our good friend from Christian Warrior Training. He's been on a tear lately. He's been doing a great job, as we know, and he's definitely a close friend. We've worked very closely with Keith.
He's a really good guy.
Yeah, super guy. Not just over the internet. We've worked together in person.
And if you go to church and you're worried about security, check out his site.
100%. So ChristianWarriorTraining.com is Keith's site. Sign up for free. Survivaldispatch.news is our Substack. Please sign up for free. Share it with people so they sign up for free. You never have to give us a penny. You're going to get a ton of value, a ton of information from it. And at the same time, you're helping us get to a larger audience. I mean, we've had some pretty crazy suppression of our channels over the years. The Substack, we average around 25,000 views within the first 12 hours or so. But CommieTube, YouTube, we've got 441,000 subscribers. We used to get 100,000 views on every episode of Survival Dispatch News. And now, once in a blue moon, we get 60, 70,000. Most of the time it's 10, 15, 20,000 views. And I actually saw somebody, Jeff, before we came on, put a comment in the live chat to say, you guys say that they stopped sending notifications. He said, I get your notifications. So there's at least one person out there gets notified by YouTube when we have new content come out. But when you're in YouTube Studio, it tells you what the source of your views are. And it's always 0 to 1% of our views came from notifications. It's the number one way that YouTube suppresses people. They don't send notifications in the app. They don't send notifications to the YouTube homepage for you. They don't send email notifications. Now, Substack, on the other hand, has an awesome email attached to it. Over 90% of the views on our videos come from people clicking on it in their email. So that's the power of notifications. So either way, like I said, it helps us to uh, grow our audience and grow our influence. I mean, at the end of the day, there's only a handful of us that are sharing the information that we're sharing to hopefully help save some Americans when the shit goes down for 9/11 2.0. So we've got 2 segments left. They're fairly short, and I want to be respectful of Jeff's time as well. So the next segment is the psychological component, social, call it cultural adaptations. And I don't know if there's a term for this or not, Jeff. If there is, I'm sure you know what it is. But is there such a thing as collective trauma or collective anxiety, collective stress? Like, did that happen in the Soviet Union, for example?
Yeah, there is. And
Okay.
I can't remember, there is a name for it, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But it's almost like when a mania basically envelops an entire population. And I think it's like boiling the old boiling the frog analogy,
Right.
except you're boiling an entire culture to where they're just inured to, this is just the way it is. And you saw it in China. You had people in communist China, they would turn in their own parents because the state told them to. In East Germany, 25% of the population were official reporting sources of the Stasi, their secret police, diming out the other 75%. You got to have a twisted society for that crap to happen.
Well, I mean, let's take it to the next logical conclusion, I guess, or effect, maybe side effect would be a good choice of words. What does that do to the behavior of your population as far as suspicion?
You don't trust anybody.
Self-censorship, polarization. There's a term that's, it's not very scientific, so it's down at my level being a college dropout, but othering. In other words, oh yeah, those other people over there.
Yeah,
thing.
Yeah, it's an us and them. You said it.
Yeah.
And when you have that kind of the inclusion of people that are basically rats for the government, how can you organize a resistance that if you get 4 people together, you got a pretty good damn chance that one of them is actually working for the government. And that's why they do it. That way you undermine dissent before it even starts. You'll still get some like Solzhenitsyn and people like that who are willing to go to prison for it. But for the most people won't. They've got wives and kids and they can't afford to go to prison for it. So it's a suppression technique.
I like MCOM Black's comment, formation mass psychosis.
Yeah, and that may be what it's called.
It captures the essence of it, even if it's not the formal term. It definitely captures it.
Yeah.
So the next part to it my question is, when these types of things happened in the Soviet Union, but because I'm just not familiar with it, but Russia's the second largest Christian nation in the world after us. What happened to religion, Orthodox Christianity in the Soviet Republic as they continue to turn the screws down in their crazy adaptation of communism, socialism, Marxism?
Well, officially it was an atheist state. They didn't recognize God. They didn't recognize religion. Now, it was obviously Russian Orthodox, but so many of the people, the older people were still God-fearing, but what they did is they got to the kids, and in school it became, where, okay, if you were religious, there's something wrong with you. And Stalin went in and he actually would blow up churches and stuff and just raise them to the ground. But others were allowed to stay. And I don't know what determined whether a church was raised or kept stay, but very few people went. Mostly the old people did. And then the Russian Orthodox Church was allowed to technically function, but under control of the party. The patriarch was selected by the government. The priests had to be approved by the government. Now, do you think you're going to get any radical priests under those circumstances? Hell no. They're all going to toe the line, or they won't be priests anymore. But they controlled. they didn't like the church, but what was left of it, they made sure they could control. And actually, Putin, when he came back in, rebuilt one of the biggest cathedrals in Moscow that Stalin had destroyed.
So keeping kind of on the same, path here, what happened to the generations of people in the Soviet Union who were born, raised, and died in this, crazy environment? What was the impact on them at a high level, like in generalities?
Well, to them, I think the party was their religion, so to speak. Socialist communism was their religion. Stalin was not their messiah necessarily, but their patriarch, or their that's what I'm looking for, like their Muhammad, so to speak. But what was ironic is there were a lot of closet Christians there. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, a lot of people went back to church and flocked back to church, because I think inside they were missing something. And, but yeah, it became its own kind of religion. And Mao did the same thing. There was a cult of personality around Stalin. There was a cult of personality around Mao. There was a cult of personality around Lenin. And one of the things I think that affected the Soviet Union was, after Stalin, there really was no leader who developed that cult around him. You had Khrushchev. He was overthrown by Brezhnev. Brezhnev was kind of a drunk. And then he was replaced by Chernenko, and then he was replaced by Andropov, and he was replaced by Gorbachev. None of them had that kind of cult of personality around them. Mao ran China for decades, but everybody had their little red book, which was their Bible, which were Mao's teachings, and you had to have it. And it was taught in the schools like it was the Bible.
How many tens of millions of people did Mao kill again?
The estimates vary between like 40 and 100 million.
Wow.
He starved a lot of them to death.
Is that the biggest genocide in history that we know?
Yeah. I think by and large, because China was such a hermit kingdom at the time, nobody really knew. Just thousands were starving to death every day, and there was no reporting of it. The Russians killed 3 million in Holendor, which was the systematic starvation of the Ukrainian people back in the 30s.
The numbers are staggering. So kind of a rhetorical question, but not a rhetorical question. What's the difference between Pravda in the USSR and our legacy media here in America today?
Pravda was honest about being a state organ. They said the official newspaper of the Soviet Union.
Great answer. That's awesome. Oh, well done.
They didn't hide their affiliation.
Well done. That's fantastic. All right. So moving into the honesty. Yeah, no, seriously, great answer. Moving into the final segment number 4. So basically maintaining or retrieving some element of freedom, faith, resilience. And here's an interesting thing. So for years, when we would go into a new client, we had this 5-step process where we would try to capture the essence, the DNA of an organization, of a business, so to speak. Like, why do they exist? And what are the core values that transcend the entire organization, so on and so forth. And what was interesting of is we had this list of, I want to say it was 100 values. And there's more values than that, but the list was like 100. And we would do these surveys, and you could tell if the business was secular, for example, versus, being outwardly American Christian. But the crazy thing is, Jeff, is that the people who claim to be atheist, agnostic, secular, their values were almost the same. Now, we're going back a few years. We're not talking the current environment, okay? We're going back in time before things went off the rails. But the values, whether they were, Christians or some form of Christianity versus the secular ones, were the same. And I came to the conclusion years ago that the values that society, especially up until say the 90s, considered American were just traditional conservative Christian values. There was really no difference. Now, of course, things have gone off the rails. But at the end of the day, it was an interesting exercise to gain some insight into customers. And then about 50% of the time, to be honest with you, we would hand them our findings and say, wish you the best luck. And they'd be like, what do you mean? What's the next step? And we'd be like, there is no next step. Well, why not? Well, because we're not compatible. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to have a disagreement over something. So we'd rather just sidestep all of that and wish you the best luck, carry on and work with people who look at the world through a similar lens to us. So with all of that being said, I guess the big question for segment number 4, and it's a short one, is the prospect of Americans becoming active to retake their rights, is that a possibility to, in this 10 years past post 9/11 2.0, or do we have we programmed Americans to the point now where they memorize, regurgitate what the official line is from the legacy media, and they're sheeple more than people?
I think there are certain generations that are yes, and I'm heartened to say that the youngest generation is a no. They're the ones that are not shying away, they are rejecting outright the wokeness. They are not afraid to stand up and say, no, I don't believe that. This is what I believe. And that is key to the country surviving. If you believe what we consider the right things, but you're afraid to say them, what's the point? The young people are these are the ones that are kind of the Charlie Kirk generation.
Oh,
they're not.
You kill me. That's where I was going next with this.
Oh yeah. Well, and they are a complete shift from, some a lot of the millennials and Gen Zs who kind of jumped into this woke culture with both feet and the pronouns and all that crap, rather than saying, he's a dude in a dress. I'm not going to call him she, because he isn't. And I think there's right. And so you can call yourself whatever you want. It's a free country, but you can't impose your bullshit on me. Yeah. And we need more people to stand up and, don't be rude about it. Just say, you want to call yourself Sally, knock yourself out. And if you change your name, then your name's Sally, but I'm not going to call you ma'am. I'm not going to say miss. I'm not going to refer you to she, her. You're a dude. Sorry. You got testicles and a penis. I'm not calling you ma'am. And you need that, just a dose of reality. And what you were saying earlier about the moral value, I'm not a very religious person. I was raised religious, but I didn't grow up religious. And I haven't been to church outside of a wedding and a funeral in I don't know how long. But I recognize I still adhere to Christian Judeo value system, because that's what this country was founded on. That was instilled in us culturally, educationally. We didn't have prayer in school when I was a kid. Every time we got put prayer back in school, I said, when was it ever there? But then they say there will always be prayer in school as long as there are exams. And there's no such, there's no atheist in a foxhole. But those values were taught to us, and we reflected them. And the reason they worked is because they were logical, sane, and fair.
I would
treat other people with dignity and respect until, as long, but you don't start a fight with someone, but if someone starts a fight with you, okay, so be it. You take them out. But now it's like, oh, you're privileged or they're a victim. It's like, no, they're not. They're just insane. And we need to get back to that.
Our audience who's been with us for the past few years has heard me quote this number more than once, but early 1950s, we had over 550,000 inpatient beds in psychiatric care facilities. And today that number is under 40,000.
And we've doubled our population in the meantime.
Exactly. And instead of putting these people, like I joke that MAGA stands for Make Asylums Great Again, and it's a joke, not a joke sort of thing. But now we have these people unleashed on society, jacked up on SSRIs with a completely distorted view of the world. I don't know if Tyler Robinson was on SSRIs or not, but I don't feel that he killed Charlie Kirk all on his own. At the very least, there were people involved in radicalizing him, and potentially worse than that, there were people who got into the planning from a tactical perspective. But this whole transgender thing, up until 2018, even a batshit crazy organization like the World Health Organization classified body dysphoria as a mental illness. And I can never remember the name of it, but there's 2 studies that I've read that were exhaustive studies, like multi-year studies, that said basically 100% of men who present themselves, they tell everybody that they're they're a woman trapped in a man's body, is all related to some sexual thing. And I just can't remember the term, but basically, yeah, but what they put women's clothes on, and it's satisfying in some sexual bizarre fetish way, right? And that women, on the other hand, I don't remember what the conclusion was. I just remember what the conclusion was for the men. But we're seeing massive numbers now of these crazy attacks because mentally ill people believe that they can cut their junk off and become the other sex and blah, 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 blah.
You're just a eunuch.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so I used to tell people, look, I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, but it's okay because I'm a lesbian.
Yeah. Well, I've been saying the same thing since I was in high school. I'm proud to be a lesbian. I love women.
That's right.
But where I was going with that is that I think that Charlie Kirk really had a profound effect. It's going to continue to have a profound effect. And he was eroding, as you mentioned, support. He was eroding the support for the politically correct bullshit that's been rammed down our throats for the past, 3-4 decades, 5 decades, whatever it is. But that's basically it for chapter 4. I'm just looking at my notes, seeing if there's anything else in here. I guess the last question is, how long does it take before somebody from a younger generation rises up as a true leader and galvanizes people to fight back against this stuff? I mean, you could probably say Charlie Kirk was one of them. He was 31 when he was assassinated.
He was, but they killed him.
Yeah.
But we need more.
I can't think of anybody who could fill his shoes. When Ben Shapiro said he was going to buy Turning Point and take over, I thought, well, bullshit. That guy's an ass.
Well, yeah. Thing is, 10 years ago, nobody knew who Charlie Kirk was either.
Right.
There is a new leader, a new young leader. We just haven't met him yet. He's there.
Makes sense.
But if you look at the Democrats, all their leadership, for the most part, 80% of their leadership are excuse my French, they're octogenarians.
Yeah.
They're 80 some odd years old. They're dinosaurs. They have no bench. Their only young people are like AOC. And she was a freaking bartender, for Christ's sakes, and not even a very good one.
Right.
They don't have deep thinking people in their ranks. And that's what they need, and they don't have. And thank God they don't have them.
So we can wrap up the main topic tonight by basically it's a safe bet that post 9/11 2.0 ongoing smaller terrorist attacks for the balance of all of our lives. You get 200,000 terrorists you let in the front door, if not more. The 9/11 2.0 is not a one and done. It kicks off an entirely different dynamic for America and for the world. So it's pretty safe to assume that the governments across the board, local, county, state, federal, are going to do all kinds of power grabs, because they always do it when there's this type of paradigm shift, for lack of a better term. But hopefully by discussing this in advance, it's too late to prevent 9/11 2.0. I mean, that horse has left the barn. This stuff, like yet last night, which, by the way, so we got kicked off of Facebook yesterday. I don't even do Facebook, but they nuked my account last night within the first 5 minutes of the broadcast because I showed the videos from the stabbing in Britain yesterday, where the guy, his name was Jihadi. You can't make it up. The guy's name was Jihadi, stabbed a bunch of Jews at a synagogue. What the most craziest part of that, Jeff, was listening to the guy in the public saying, he's trying to set a bomb off, shoot him. And then the cop finally shoots him. I'm thinking to myself, what the F are you doing? Kill that freaking guy. You know, he's got a bomb and he's doing this and it's not going off. You have to wait until a bystander says you should probably shoot this guy. You know, like that's
yeah, you're right. I guess I should. Yeah.
But the reason I mention it, so we get kicked off of Facebook last night, whatever. I don't give a shit about them or YouTube, to be quite frank. And they sent me an email and they said, if you disagree with our ruling, click here. So I clicked and it said, okay. It's like, oh, your response has been submitted. There was no opportunity to put any text in or anything. It was just like, okay, your response has been noted. And I wake up this morning and I get this email saying, congratulations. We decided that you shouldn't be wiped off of Facebook and we've restored your account, sort of thing. But just insanity stuff. But with all that being said, we can put a wrap on tonight's episode. I think that, again, the lesson is that there are turbulent times ahead, and that if you don't stand up for your rights, they're going to be stepped on. No ifs, ands, or buts. And probably the best thing, unless you can think of something else, Jeff, what's the saying? That is it sunlight or light is the best disinfectant or something like that?
Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Shine a light on this stuff is the best you can do.
Air that stuff out.
Do your best to prepare for what's on the horizon. I had a meeting with a customer this morning, and I said to her, you know, she said, what's the takeaway from this 144 episodes that you're doing? I said, honestly, the takeaway is raise people's awareness to the point that, God forbid, somebody is caught on or near the X when these attacks happen, that they understand they have got to get off the X as fast as possible. Don't wait for first responders. There will be bad guys dressed up as first responders. If you don't need like life-saving medical care, you know, get away from wherever it was as far as you can, as fast as you can. Distance equals safety. And for people to prep, and here's like, Jeff, as I'm having this conversation with this girl this morning, I said to her, look, here's the deal. Let's assume that our intelligence is wrong. It's not. We've seen the hard intelligence. Khalid's group has infiltrated 80 out of approximately 120 terrorist camps in Afghanistan. But let's just assume that the intelligence is bunk and that it's no good. Every single thing that we are bringing to people's attention and coaching them to do will benefit them regardless of what calamity they may encounter, whether it be a hurricane, an ice storm, a wildfire, whatever the case may be. Having stuff prepped up is just good common sense, especially in light of we knew that the supply chain was weak, but your average American who doesn't work in the tech industry, doesn't understand how all the bits and pieces fit together, now realizes that supply chains are incredibly weak. And you've got to have stuff stacked up. And I mean, yeah, this is our sponsor, our premier sponsors, Carnivalt, carnivalt.com, you know, freeze-dried American beef, chicken, and pork, no mRNA, no antibiotics, no histamines. They don't give us any, you know, affiliate income. Use a coupon, eat meat, get 10% off, all one word. But they do help us defer, you know, a good portion of our expenses. You need to stack stuff up like this. Like if you got a week's worth of food in your home, you're going to end up in a FEMA refugee camp, and that's the last place you want to be. So just try to put a little bit away here and there. Food you're going to eat, you know, like it's not like you're betting on a horse that's not going to come in when you stock up on long shelf life foods at all. So speaking of Carnivalt, we're actually at that point now where we've got the Carnivalt Hero of the Day. I mean, I absolutely love this part. Kills me. I swear to God, I feel like John Madden every time I play that Monday Night Football. So with that being said, check this out. This is pretty awesome here. So this guy here, there's a bunch of people that were in dire straits, that their cars were in the flood. Some of them were handicapped. They couldn't get out. This guy jumps in and starts carrying people out. It's only a 52-second video, but this guy is a true hero. Let me see here. His name
Where
is.
was that?
Say again.
Where was that?
A Valley Father.
Is that Phoenix?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Phoenix, Arizona.
It is. And
or is it not Globe? My hometown got slammed. 3 people were killed in those floods.
So I want to give credit where credit is due. Somebody sent this to us. I want to say it was maybe Mark Spruill, who's one of our Guardian members. I should have put it in the brief and I forgot to, but normally we pick the Carnival Hero of the Day, but this actually came from one of our Guardians. And I think it was Mark. If it wasn't Mark and it was somebody else, I apologize. I got some timers. It's kind of like Alzheimer's. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget, especially if I don't write it down. But this is an awesome story. This Jarvis Johnson, stepped up to rescue people. This is hats off to this guy big time. I don't know. Okay.
Over to the embankment, and then he came back and got me.
A Valley Father is being called a hero after saving multiple stranded drivers on a flooded freeway. And it turns out he had a lot at stake when it came to putting his life on the line for complete strangers.
I had just had a baby not even 24 hours ago.
That's right. With his wife still in the hospital, he was driving alone on the freeway when he jumped into action.
I thought about them as like if they were my mom, because if my mom was out there, I would expect somebody with good intentions to go out there and get my mom like no other. If that was my wife out there, I would expect somebody to go out there and get my wife like no other. Like I thought about that.
My angel, she's my angel. He's a hero. He's our hero.
Isn't that an awesome story, Jeff?
That's cool. I think it's in Phoenix.
Yeah, you're right, because I saw a couple things, Phoenix off to the side that you couldn't see on my shared screen. So next one up is reader submitted story of the day. This is from Dale, the prolific Dale. So anybody who's in our Guardian private signal chat knows who Dale is, because Dale, much like Khalid and myself, doesn't sleep. He works 24 hours a day. And we've got some amazing people who share information, but this guy's a machine. Dale's an absolute machine, posts a lot of high quality stuff in the chat. So Georgia rep, this is crazy, by the way, because we own property in Georgia, our cabins there. So we get to vote there for, our local elections and state elections. So Georgia rep Rua Roman is a Muslim being exposed as previously being the communication director of an NGO convicted of sending money overseas to a terrorist organization. Their founders are tied to that terrorist organization. She is now running for governor of Georgia. Rua Roman is also directly tied and funded by multiple Marxist organizations in America, like Democrat Socialists of America and Working Families Party. Both also endorse Zoran Mandami. Of course, he's running for New York City mayor. This is the takeover of America beginning. I can't remember if it's this video. It probably is. But if it isn't, one of her campaign videos, she's wearing the stuff on her head and everything.
Yeah.
And saying, I am as Georgia as anybody out there. And no, not at all. You never watched Dukes of Hazzard, for crying out loud? You ain't from Georgia. Let's be realistic. So I'm going to play the whole video. It's a minute and 21 seconds long, but it's worth watching.
I'm as Georgia as we come.
There you go.
I'm
Right
also
out of
the
gate.
granddaughter of Palestinian refugees. My family lost everything and had to rebuild from nothing.
So this is Rua Roman. She was born in Jordan and has now entered the 2026 race for governor of Georgia. If you live in Georgia, here's what you need to know before you eventually cast a vote. Roman was communications director for CARE Georgia. Let me tell you a little bit about CARE. In 2008, the Holy Land Foundation was convicted of sending money to Hamas. During the trial, evidence came out showing CARE's founders had ties to the same Hamas network. After that, the FBI cut them off. You're like, what does that mean? Well, because after 9/11, FBI treated CARE as a partner, bringing them into outreach programs with Muslim communities. CARE denies the allegations. Now, in 2022, when Roman initially ran for state representative, she was endorsed by Working Families Party. WFP works closely with Democrat Socialist of America, DSA. Both are culturally and economically Marxist. WFP is a registered political party. Candidates run on that line. DSA, it's not an actual party. That's kind of like the get out the vote machine. So case in point, Zohar Mandami, possibly New York City's future mayor, is endorsed by DSA and WFP. Rashida Tlaib, also endorsed by both. So Georgia voters, this is a little bit about the movement behind Roman.
Yeah. So the thing that concerns me there, Jeff, is that, I mean, Fulton County, we're looking for property in Tennessee or Alabama, potentially South Carolina, because Georgia's one stolen election away from turning into a Democrat nightmare. In Fulton County, there was a ton of cheating, of course, that happened in the 2020 election. And it's very concerning. But here's the thing, is that those same machines are still being used to conduct elections. And it's not hard for them to install somebody like this.
Yeah.
And imagine if she was the governor of Georgia, what that would do. I mean, I don't even want to think about it, to be quite frank. So moving on, if you're in Georgia, spread the word to people, who she's funded by and what she stands for. So the conflict of question of the night, in a modern day Jericho scenario, your religious leader has ordered you and the men of your congregation to go and ransack a nearby city for supplies and kill every living being therein, including the elderly, women, and children. You prayed and fasted, but you are still on the fence, and it's time to go. Would you join in? Why or why not? Jeff, I know this is a really tough one, but
yeah, that's a big hell no. If I was going to kill anyone to be my so-called religious leader, no religious leader worth spit is going to say, go kill kids. And that's just evil. That's Satan incarnate. I think if anyone, like I said, if I was going to shoot anyone, it'd be him.
Agreed. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, Jim Jones, David Koresh, that sort of stuff. That's a really easy question. I'm not going to kill women and children or defenseless people, period, under any circumstances. Where there's a will, there's a way. You can always find a way to get by, especially without hurting other people. It's just insanity. So I just want
supplies, trade for them.
Yeah, exactly. Figure it out. There's always a way to figure it out. So I just want to one last time mention Carnivalt, carnivalt.com. Eat meat's the coupon, one word, 10% off. They're an awesome partner to work with. We're very fortunate that we were put into each other's paths in this journey that we're on. I see I've got a couple messages from people asking about the POC link radios, and here they are. So once the first 1,000 of these radios are gone, the price goes from $399 for a pair to $1,140 a pair. Right now, you can get these also not just for $399, but you don't ever have to pay for network access. This should be part of your comms strategy, keeping in mind that 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. If you're technical, shortwave, high frequency is the way to go. That's the only thing that can get you super long distances if all the infrastructure is down. The Garmin InReach products, InReach Mini 2 and Messenger, are great products. If the ground-based infrastructure goes down, your phone that's tethered to the Garmin device then goes to the Iridium satellite network, comes straight down to the Garmin device that your friend or family has on the other end without traversing the op center. Whereas if they had network access, it'll come down to their comm center, and go across the wire to them. So shortwave, high frequency. You can check out Dr. Fabian and I published a video yesterday that summarized 2 years of testing on communications. It's on our Substack, it's on our YouTube. And the only thing we didn't cover is shortwave HF because of the cost. It's not just a little bit more complex than our forms, but if I went to our audience, Jeff, and this, if I said, hey, y'all need to go out and buy an ICOM 7300 shortwave HF radio. No, by the way, you find them on special for $1,100, but the MSRP is $1,500. Oh, and then you got to buy this, antenna to go with it,
and a tower to put it on.
Yep. And you got to go get your technician's license from the FCC and blah, 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 blah. That's a heavy lift. The Garmin devices aren't a heavy lift. The POC radios aren't a heavy lift. There's a link down in the description. And if you take that, they'll know that the sale came from us. You'll get another piece to your communication strategy. If you sign up as a Guardian at survivaldispatch.news, $7.99 a month or $74.99 a year, gets you 2.5 months for free. You will get our SDENS notifications, Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System. You'll get them in our private signal chat. You'll get them by email, and you will get it to those POC link radios. I have a QR code that I'll send you, and you'll be in the club, so to speak. One button, whether your radio is turned on or not, that message is going to go to your radio, and there's a smartphone app that goes with it. So if you missed it, say you had your radio turned off, when you pull the smartphone app up, it has a recording of everything that's gone out, who sent it, what time it was. One click, boom, you get the emergency notification that way. And of course, like I said, you get invited to our signal chat, which I can't keep up with it. It's incredible. And you also get 37 Survival Dispatch Insider e-mags. You get all the sources for our sit reps. That's the end of that spiel. I am going to be back on Sunday evening to do a sit rep. We've had quite a few requests lately from people who've been with us for a long time, where we used to do this chapter 1, 2, and 3 thing on current news happening. So chapter 1, we would cover a whole bunch of topics that were in the news. Chapter 2, we would focus on one particular thing, like the big story. And then chapter 3 was funny, haha stuff. It was actually pretty comical, some of the stuff that we did in chapter 3. Sunday night, there's just been so much news has piled up. I'm going to do a situation report that tries to roll up all the big stuff that's been happening recently. Then Monday night, Jeff, Randy, Khalid, and I will be back with the next episode in our long war series. And I'll tell you all about that Sunday night, so you can think about what's coming next. But I think that's it for tonight, Jeff. I'll see you all in about 48 hours. JJ Morris got a new video launching on Substack at 08:38 in the morning. Ask me why 08:38 in the signal chat. I'll tell you why it's that time. That launches in the morning on our Substack, 3 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel. And again, I'll be back in 48 hours on Sunday evening with a sit rep between now and then. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America. And enjoy the closing video. Keep an eye on the live chat. I've got 6 more links to share with y'all before we pull a total pin on this. Over and out.